Thank you all so much for being here this morning. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Children's Guardian Fund, it's both my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you to our 14th annual Fall Luncheon. We are deeply grateful for your support and appreciate the fact that you've taken time out of your busy schedule to be with us today in support of the Guardian Ad Litem program and the 1,300 children in our area who are currently in the custody of the state. The needs of the most vulnerable children in our area remain great, and it's often the youngest children who suffer disproportionately. Currently, almost half the children taken into care in Sarasota are preschoolers, so they're less than 5 years old. Emotionally, that's heart-wrenching to hear, but on a purely practical note, it's clear that if we don't step in to protect these children while they are young, we will almost certainly be paying to incarcerate them when they are older. To me, preschool seems a much better bargain than prison. It's a lot cheaper. There are some special guests here today that I would just like to mention. Everybody's presence is enormously important to us. But first, my grateful thanks to David Lawrence, our distinguished speaker, who drove here today from Miami and undoubtedly wins the prize for most miles traveled in order to eat chicken. Thank you so much, David. I'm looking forward very much to hearing David speak. Frank Prado, who is the Regional Director of the Guardian Ad Litem program for the area that includes our own 12th Judicial Circuit, is also with us this morning. And we are also delighted to welcome Judge Lee Horwath from Sarasota's 12th Judicial Circuit Court. We are especially honored that Adam Trebuge, the Democratic candidate for the District 71 State House seat, has chosen to spend part of his day with us. Obviously, the children of our community are important to him. Finally, I would like to mention how pleased we are to have Mrs. June Appistorff with us once again. Each year, Mrs. Appistorff and her family provide donations to ensure that during the holiday season, no child in foster care will be without gifts. We at the Children's Guardian Fund have a first-hand view of how much this ongoing generous support means to the children in care. I have one final thank you to offer to Vanessa Creswell, our luncheon chair for this event, who also happens to be my daughter, and who only had to be asked once to take on the task of acting as this year's luncheon chair. She swears that she took it on because I lied to her and said it would be only 2 hours' work. But she just assumed this huge challenge despite holding down a full-time job outside the home and being mother to 4 children. She was well qualified for the task since she happens to work as a special events manager. But more importantly, the cause is dear to her heart. She was herself a licensed foster mom for several years, and she also volunteered for 2 years at Bradenton Transitional Center, which is a prison for women felons, and she mentored the women with felony convictions who were struggling to re-enter civil society and reunite with their families. Vanessa, I'm so grateful for all you've done. Thank you. Take it from here.
Thank you, Mommy. I sound really good. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to our Children's Guardian Fund Fall Luncheon. I have just a few reminders for you before we start our program. If you haven't had a chance to buy a raffle ticket or bid on an auction item, please take a couple of minutes to do so now. This year we have a great prize for our raffle. The grand prize is a fabulous Best of Sarasota basket. It's filled with theater, ballet, orchestra tickets, a $100 gift certificate for Selva's Restaurant, champagne, Morton's chocolate, coffee, and Italian crystal goblets, and it's valued at $700. So the raffle tickets start at $5, so it's a good deal. And in our auction, we have gift certificates to some great local restaurants, Owen's Fish Camp, the Crab and Fin, and Leroy Selman's, to name just a few. We also have Total Wine gift certificate, a massage spa package, all kinds of things. All of these items were donated for this luncheon by our very generous sponsors and private individuals, many of whom are here with us for lunch, so thank you. Please take a look at the front display table, and you'll get complete details about all our prizes. Our CGF volunteers, who have a heart sticker on their name badges, can help you with the auction or buying a raffle ticket. All of the money from raffle ticket purchases and our auction items goes directly to the children. CGF funds help to buy essentials for the children like school uniforms, backpacks, prescription eyeglasses, as well as things that at least my children kind of take for granted, but are treats, such as birthday cakes and teddy bears. Our auction and raffle will be closing at 12:30, so don't miss out on your chance to win some great prizes, as well as help the Children's Guardian Fund raise money to support the children from our community who are currently in state care. You may have noticed our somewhat unique table centerpieces this year. On each of your tables, there's a basket of toiletries and sundries for either a young child or a teen. These baskets contain much needed supplies, which our volunteer guardians will be able to pick up at the local GAL offices when they first go to make contact with a child who is entering care. The value of these baskets goes well beyond any dollar amount. As you know, many of the children who enter into state care have very few, if any, possessions of their own. The tote baskets include personal hygiene items such as Scooby-Doo body wash, Tweety Bird shampoo, toothbrushes, combs, and they're all packed in a tote that the children can reuse for storage as they find their way in a strange and new environment. These totes are not only practical, but also great icebreakers for our volunteer guardians when they first meet a child. On your tables, there's some donation envelopes, and you can buy one of these baskets for a child. You can choose the donation amount. Every little bit counts. If your table needs more envelopes, there's some up at the front display table. With your help today, we would love to be able to give an age-appropriate basket to each and every one of the children entering care over the next year. So I'd like to thank you personally for helping the Children's Guardian Fund support our volunteer guardian ad litems who help the children who make up our community. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.
This is our third year in a row when we'll be having a sunset cruise on board Yacht Freedom, which is the 1926 restored ship, the presidential sister ship to the presidential yacht Sequoia. And on your table are sign-up sheets if you're interested in learning more about the event, which will be in late February. So if you're interested in receiving more information, just sign your name on this form. And if those of you would just pat whoever closest to the form, if you just pass it around the table so everyone could see it, that would be great. And just sign up, and then we'll contact you and give you more details as the event draws nearer. As Vanessa mentioned, on the table is also a blue envelope. And we thank you for coming and for being so generous already on behalf of the children. But as you know, there are more and more kids in care, and the need is greater every year. So for those of you who are inclined, we hope you'll consider a special donation today on behalf of the kids. You know, the Children's Guardian Fund believes not just in helping provide essentials, but in changing outcomes. And we know that children entering the state welfare system are in crisis, and entering an underfunded school system, ill-equipped to handle their special needs, compounds the crisis. So we want to change outcomes, as I've said, and last year we began a small academic awards pilot project, the goal of which is to help these children understand the need for a good education, incent them to try hard, and to show them that someone is proud of them and care about their success. And the program is simple. The children are rewarded with a certificate of achievement and a small cash award for working hard to achieve the best grades they can. And this program, we'd like to continue it. And as I said, it's a pilot project. We'd like to continue it and expand upon it. So we urge you to consider a gift toward that program today and all of our projects by just writing a check of any amount and putting it in this blue envelope. And lastly, let me just say that we're pleased to have a guest here today, Susan Stockham, who was our guest of honor, our speaker, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and also a young man who's not here with us today, Derek Riggins, who was also a special guest speaker. And Derek was a foster child, and Susan and Derek met at our luncheon. And lo and behold, Susan adopted Derek. And so Susan's an adoption attorney, and it was a very special meeting. We continue to work together, and it's very special to the Children's Guardian Fund that you met here, and then now Derek has a family.
I would like to introduce a very valuable member of our Children's Guardian Fund Board of Directors, Magistrate Susan Malucci. Magistrate Malucci is a certified family court and dependency court mediator and a member of the General Magistrate Committee. Magistrate Malucci also founded Next Step, an innovative tutoring, mentoring, and service program offering support to teens who are aging out of foster care. Magistrate?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm here to introduce our speaker today. And he sent us his bio, and his bio lists a lot of things. But the most important things about David Lawrence are, I'm going to tell you what are not the most important things about him first, because some of the most important things about him are so amazing. He was publisher of the Miami Herald, and he retired in 1999. Before that, he was the publisher of the Detroit Free Press. He was a graduate from the University of Florida, Harvard Business School. He was inducted into the Florida Newspapers Hall of Fame in 2010. And although all of those are great achievements, none of them are the most important things about David Lawrence. David is a family man. He's married to Roberta. He has 5 children and 5 grandchildren. He's always been a child advocate, and when he retired, he did so to become president of the Early Childhood Initiative Foundation. Right now, he is involved in this initiative as the University Scholar for Early Childhood Development at the University of Miami School of Education. I promise you that when you hear David Lawrence, you will never forget him. You will never forget what you hear today. I heard him speak earlier in the year, and I was amazed. My perspective on things changed dramatically just from listening to him. And I know that most of us here go to many luncheons and dinners and hear many speakers, but you will not forget David Lawrence. Let's welcome him today.
On Saturday, ladies and gentlemen, I spoke at Florida International University and was introduced by a professor as, with both these words, amazing and fabulous. And I subsequently said when I got up there that, don't you believe it, I never want to be introduced as fabulous or amazing or even the nice things Her Honor has said, because I will never live up to this, I promise you. Now, Jasmine told you that I had traveled the most miles to get chicken, and you need to understand that I grew up in a chicken farm, and I didn't eat my chicken today. Chicken farming is the least glamorous form of farming. The other thing I want to say in preface is it's sure nice to have somebody say, "Thank you, Mommy." I thought that was lovely, and so I give Vanessa great credit for that. I'm really glad I'm here. What I'm glad about is that, among other things, the topic is important, but I'm also in some ways coming home. That chicken farm I was talking about was 50 miles northwest of Syracuse, New York. And if you know your geography, we have a snow effect as it sweeps over Lake Ontario. And drifts were literally on the top of the house. I'm one of 9 children, raised on the farm I told you about, and in 1956, the farm went broke. I was 14 years old. And we looked through the World Book Encyclopedia of 1953. Now, I've always loved to read. Indeed, I still read at least a book a week. And my idea of reading included the World Book Encyclopedia page after page. I wasn't just looking for things. And my parents and my siblings used the World Book Encyclopedia to figure out where we would move next. And we moved to the tiny town of Onico, popularly called Onika in those days. It was not exactly the upper crust of anywhere. I went there to Manatee High School in Bradenton, and my father ran a newspaper that maybe none of you have been here long enough to remember, but he ran a newspaper called the Sarasota News. You may or may not know that this county was the first sizable county to turn Republican, and this goes back to the 50s. And Sarasota in its time had 3 daily newspapers. It was the smallest city in the United States of America with 3 newspapers. I'm deeply aware today that you know far more than I do about the children of Manatee and Sarasota counties and the 700,000 people who live here. But I would tell you these 3 things. More than 1 in 5 of your children lives in the full federal definition of poverty. And I promise you that I'm not being a leftist or a rightist about anything, but how can this be in the richest, most generous country in the world? I also know that more than 30% of Sarasota students can't read with even minimum proficiency at the end of 3rd grade, and the percentage in Manatee County is even higher. And I can tell you that 2 in every 5 high school sophomores in Sarasota County cannot read at grade level, and a full half in Manatee. That ought to alarm all of us. You and I live in an ever more connected world. And I would tell you that if we want for our own families and for everyone else a community and country full of optimistic, contributing people, you and I are not going to be able to hide from those who will grow up to do us and themselves great harm. So I would argue if we believe in all children, we're going to help the future of the United States, the country we love. That it makes sense, practical, moral, economic, that we be mindful of how everyone is doing. You and I want to live in safe and secure neighborhoods. We want less crime. We want people to grow up to own homes and businesses and cars. We want more people to share the basic costs of societal well-being. And if we want that, then we ought to be aware of the quite extraordinary evidence of the power of early investment and the power of children who grow up dreaming about what their future might be and a chance to achieve those dreams. This audience is full of people who add so much to the lives and futures of children. And many of you, on behalf of the 1,300 children in foster care. So I say quite genuinely, I salute you. I remember a column some while back by Peggy Noonan who was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan and now writes a column in the Wall Street Journal. And I think it says something about you. In a way, the world is a great liar. It shows you it worships and admires money, but at the end of the day, it says it adores fame and celebrity, but it really doesn't. The world admires and wants to hold on to and not lose goodness. It admires virtue. At the end, it gives its greatest tributes to generosity, honest courage, mercy, talents well used, talents that brought into the world make it better. That's what we talk about in eulogies because that's what's important. We don't say the thing about Joe was he was rich. We say, if we can, the thing about Joe was that he took care of people. I grew up a very old-fashioned way, as I told you, on a farm with real chores to do, and in a most loving family with 8 brothers and sisters. I told you the farm didn't make it, so we moved here, got almost nothing for the house, started all over again, and my parents were able to send all 9 of us to college. All 9 of us were graduated from Florida or Florida State. A state school was our only real option. We weren't talking about Harvard. My parents had extraordinary human values and enormous expectations of each of us. They expected us to tell the truth. They expected us to be fair. They expected us to work hard, expected us to lead unselfish lives. When I grew up, all 9 of us, plus my parents, sat around the dining room table. And my memory is of my father quizzing us all on politics and government and other things that were going on in the news that day. He also quizzed us, as did my mother, on how we did in school that day. And I promise you that we were expected to do well. Each of us grew up in a very blessed family. I've lived all my life in the spirit of meeting my parents' hopes and expectations while they were on this earth and while they're in heaven. The values they gave me sustained me all my life. And I emphasize that nothing is more important in yours and my work with children in foster care and with all children than a caring and knowledgeable parent. Nothing. That I lead an optimistic and idealistic life is among my greatest blessings. So too is the fact that I lead, if you came to know me, a much simple life. And that I appreciate and love my wife, Roberta, even more than we were married 49 years ago this December. If she and our 5 children and their children and spouses are okay, then I'm basically okay. When you have young children, you can fix their problems. Turns out they grow up to be adults, and it's more difficult to do that. Frequently, I'm asked to slow down. Other people use this awful word, retirement. I believe to the depths of my soul that I probably ought to slow down a bit. But retirement seems to me unhealthy and unwise. There is simply too much to do that I like to do, and I'm not saving my energy for the next world. To be sure, I am driven, but I don't want you to label me with a pejorative workaholic. Truth to tell, I never wanted to miss work. I never thought it was work. To this very day, I remain driven by an eagerness to learn, driven by what remains to be done, driven by injustices and inequality. I also want you to know that I had my priorities straight. Every one of my children's events, I was there. You were told by Her Honor that I came from the world of journalism. For 35 years at 7 newspapers, as reporter, editor, or publisher, I never missed a day of work. Now, that is also the mark of an obsessive, compulsive human being. So while I came in, I infected many other people. They didn't come in, so it was not a recipe for American productivity. But in what other field might I have had the opportunity of interviewing the dictator in Havana for 5.5 hours? Or the President of the United States on Air Force One? Or talk in Rome with Pope John Paul II about Miami and Cuba? Or have dinner with the Queen of England? And then, about 15 years ago, I opened a much different chapter of life, a chapter in which I have been engaged now for more than a dozen years. 15 years ago, the then governor, many of you will remember him, was Lawton Chiles, who I think was a particularly good human being. And he decided in 1996 to set up a governor's commission on education and ask 55 citizens throughout the state to serve for 2 years as a civic assignment. And one of the 6 task forces was school readiness. And the governor hornswoggled me into chairing this. And the fact of the matter is, though I have 5 children, now ages 48 to 27, I had no concept whatever of school readiness. And what I came to learn left me with the sense that it spoke to the very future of children and the very future of a country we love. And so that's how I came to devote all my energies to the topic. I like to learn. I read at least a book a week, mostly history and biographies and good fiction. And the work that I and others did led to these 3 things and much more. Number 1, the passage of a constitutional amendment making Florida among only 3 states in the country with free pre-kindergarten available for all 4-year-olds. This year, there are 175,000 children in a program, more than 70% of all 4-year-olds, and a lot needs to be done to fix its quality. But I'm delighted it is embedded in the Constitution of the state of Florida. Number 2, the passage in my own community of a dedicated funding source called the Children's Trust. All the money spent on early intervention and prevention, all of it overseen by a public-private board, an independent public-private board. So just imagine this. I live in a county of 2.5 million people. That means we're larger than 16 states in the Union. We are not the easiest place in America, you may have heard. We have more people born in another country than any other urban community in the United States of America. People like me, non-Hispanic white, and most of you are 15% of the population, and an even lesser percentage of the 35,000 babies born a year. This is a county that can be cynical and angry. And we pay county commissioners $6,000 a year to watch over a $4 billion budget. Now, nothing that I read in political science in college suggested that was a wise course to take. Yet it's been on the ballot 12 different times to move it to the state formula of 92,000. And to this moment, it has failed every single time. So each year now, we have more than $120 million to invest in higher quality child care, foster care, after-school care, and it put nurse practitioners and nurses and social workers in 165 public schools. And then number 3, building on the successful passage of the Children's Trust, we launched what is called the Children's Movement of Florida. We already have 325,000 followers, 17 regional leadership committees throughout Florida, a steering committee of 28 distinguished Floridians from both parties and independents, And what we are trying to do is to build something enduring and sustainable, and the power to insist on a real change of how this state handles its priorities. Something wrong, it seems to me, when we can get $2,383 for a pre-K slot and $51,000 to incarcerate a juvenile, and that without medical help. We can build a road about any time we want in Florida. We've not had trouble building prisons. And I don't want you to fall into the trap of telling me, don't you know it's the Great Recession and that we're not out of it yet. And children will have to wait their turn. Frankly, I don't believe it. I cannot remember a time in my lifetime when children had their real turn. And I'm going to tell you about two sentences from David Brooks, the New York Times columnist. The problem is not that America lacks resources. The problem is that they are misallocated. Somehow we have 500,000 children in Florida without health insurance. And somehow in the last 11 years, we've spent $500 billion to bring democracy to Afghanistan. I'm not being political. I'm being straightforward and honest. What the Children's Trust has done thus far has led to a growing commitment to a higher quality pre-K, as well as a statewide outreach effort to make health insurance available for all children. And meanwhile, just recently in a press conference with the governor and the First Lady in Tallahassee, we launched a reading and mentoring initiative in 10 major Florida regions and already have almost 2,000 trained volunteers. All of it buttressed by $3 million from a wonderful Florida couple named Carol and Barney Barnett. If you go to Publix, her father started the store. They're deeply interested, as I am, in the future of everyone's child. I want you to understand what a movement is. A real movement, it seems to me, is about everyone. The civil rights movement, some would argue, was about black people or minorities. I would argue it was about an American sense of equity and justice for everyone. And the women's movement, I would argue, was not just about women. It was about all of us. And when you try to build a real movement, it's never about those children. It's about everyone's child. My children grew up with Fred Rogers, and perhaps some of yours did as well. And he said this some years ago, quote, "Our goal as a nation must be to make sure that no child is denied the chance to grow in knowledge and character from the very first years. In Mr. Rogers' neighborhood," he said, "every child is welcome in the world of learning. Not just a few, not just ones from certain neighborhoods, but every child." I'm a trained journalist, a paid skeptic, but never a cynic. And I don't want to tell any stories unless I understand them myself. And so what I have learned these last dozen years or so, I give you just 6 quick basics. Number 1, 90% of brain growth occurs by age 5. Number 2, children need to grow in a number of ways, not only cognitively, intellectually, physically, but also socially, emotionally, behaviorally, developmentally, and yes, I would say spiritually. The national statistics, the research tells us 1/3 of all children entering kindergarten in the United States of America can't pay attention in school. If you can't pay attention, you're not going to learn much. Number 3, a dollar spent wisely up front in a child's life will save at least $7 later on that we're not going to spend on police and prosecution and prison. And did you know that the state of Florida spends $2 billion of your money on public school remediation? Number 4, at least 30% of children start school significantly behind, and an enormous number of them get further behind. And the research also tells you that if you have 100 children at the end of first grade who are lousy readers, at the end of fourth grade, 88 of the 100 are still lousy readers. It's hard to catch them up. Number 5, when I went to Manatee High and then the University of Florida, ours was a country number 1 in both high school and college graduation rates. We're now number 21 in high school and 16th in college. And then I tell you to alarm you that 3 out of every 4 17 to 24-year-olds in the United States of America cannot enter the American military. Have a substance abuse problem, a criminal justice problem, an academic problem, or a physical problem. You ought to be worried about the national security of the country we love. You and I are in an ever more changing world. 2/3 of mothers with children from birth to age 5 work outside the home. I see that with my own children. That's not the America of my childhood. By the end of the decade in this country, children of color will be in the majority. And there are some people, not myself, there are some people who will live long enough to reach the middle of the century, and what we call minorities will be in the majority. If you and I want to do right by the children and the community and the country, you and I are going to have to start working long before formal school. I want to give you just 2 sentences from a book called Disrupting Class by the Harvard professor Clayton Christensen, a book that Jeb Bush led me to. Quote, a rather stunning body of research is emerging that suggests that starting reforms at kindergarten, let alone in elementary, middle, or high school, is far too late. By some estimates, he writes, 98% of education spending occurs after the basic intellectual capacities have been mostly determined. Think about that. And the consequences of all this are enormous, and not just in the ways you'd think. I have come to know a Harvard professor named Dr. Jack Shonkoff, who writes, we now know that adversity early in life can not only disrupt brain circuits that lead to problems with literacy, can also affect the development of the cardiovascular system and the immune system and the metabolic regulatory systems, and lead not only to more problems learning in school, but also greater risk for diabetes and hypertension and heart disease and cancer and depression and substance abuse. That's how important this is. What I speak about this noontime speaks to both moral and practical imperatives. What sort of people are we, you and I? What will be the meaning of each of our lives? Life moves so very swiftly, and it can go so suddenly. How are you and I going to spend the limited time we have? That, to me, is our lifelong test. Nelson Mandela, a figure I admire greatly, said, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than in the way it treats its children. If I sound a bit evangelistic, it is because I am. Even though you and I might toil at the side of angels, we're not angelic. People with a passion to do good sometimes should feel pleased with progress, as you here should feel pleased. But none of us should ever be satisfied that we have done enough. And it will be time to rest when we enter the next world. My father always used to warn us about trying to save the world. And I certainly have come to understand that you and I cannot save the world. But you and I could save many children. And those we help, upon succeeding themselves, have the opportunity to contribute to better lives for the generations to come. It seems to me that you and I have a choice. We can invest in high-quality early childhood care, development, and education, or pay much, much more in the future. Or said another way by the Dr. Carl Manager, what we do to children, they will do to society. I don't want you to remind me that everyone loves children. I know that. But I want to know what that love really means. If everyone loved children, loved everyone's child in God's world, we would do far better and so much more. If everyone loved children, a little girl named Nubia would be alive today. Last year, I chaired a blue ribbon panel on her death. She died in darkness, in fear, and in terror. It was an evil death, and I promise you there is evil in this world. The only saving grace is that she is surely in heaven. I pray for Nubia frequently. And I pray in her name that we will come to insist that every child have the best possible chance to lead a fulfilled and loving life. It seems to me that you who work in this circuit make it possible for guardians ad litem to do their work. Are people who strive every single day to take children from the darkness and into the light of a secure place where they can learn and thrive. In Psalm 127, we are told, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord." I would hope that none of us would forget that. I would hope that we would ask God's blessing on all the children and all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. We tried to come up with an idea of a suitable gift to give to somebody who has so much to inspire us and has put himself to such effort on our behalf. And we came up with the idea. Normally, when you make a gift like this, you say, here's the picture, it's suitable for framing. Well, we have it sort of upside down. Here's the frame, please take it home, and we will provide the pictures to go in it after the event is over. Thank you so much.
Can I say, folks, I asked Vanessa earlier to do this for me, and she said she'd do her darndest to help me. I'd love to have you get regular updates on the children's movement. All I need is your name and your email address. You can give a card or however you want to do this. I'm not going to sell you Wheaties or oil or something else, but I think it is crucial that we build a movement. So Vanessa, thank you for helping me with that.
Thank you again. And we now, I have the very great honor and pleasure of presenting CGF's Lifetime of Child Advocacy Award to our own Dr. Hal Headley. Hal has been an active child advocate for more than 40 years. He started his career of service working as a teacher, coach, and school administrator in his home state of Virginia. 27 years ago, Hal came to Sarasota with his wife, Luann, herself an early education teacher, and their 4 children, several of whom are here today. He became director of the 12th Judicial Circuit Guardian Ad Litem program, a charter school principal, and Special Olympics county coordinator. Hal served for 15 years, for the final years of his career, as CEO of the Child Protection Center here in Sarasota. And those of us involved with child welfare in this area know how vital that Child Protection Center is. Hal has been honored with many, many awards recognizing his advocacy on behalf of children, including Professional Youth Worker of the Year from Sarasota County, Distinguished Service Award from the State of Florida Council on Crime and Delinquency, Florida's Finest from the Governor of Florida, and Citizen of the Year from the Kiwanis in 1999. Other recent awards include Florida Olympic Committee Administrator of the Year, the Lawton Childs Award from the Healthy Start Coalition, Florida Dependency Summit 12th Judicial Circuit Leadership Award, and Special Olympics Coach of the Year. As you can see, the list of Hal's accomplishments and service is so long that this award from the Children's Guardian Fund will get lost among the many statues and certificates and notes of recognition he has received. But even if the statue gets lost, the contributions Hal has made to the most vulnerable children in our community constitute a living legacy that will continue to shine for many years as the children whose lives he saved grow to adulthood and become productive members of our society. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Children's Guardian Fund, I am very proud to present our Lifetime Child Advocacy Award to Dr. Hal Headley.
Wow. Thanks. Wow. And by the way, I was under strict orders from Jasmine to be short, and I always have been. I'm working on it. Real quickly, I do have a bunch of people to thank, and a lot of you in this room, but I wanted to start by saying it's really neat to be in the room with some of my personal heroes, one being David, another, and he doesn't like me to say this, but another being Mike Michelson, and another being Grazie McGillicuddy, and another one, emerging one, I didn't know her a year ago, is Jasmine. And the most important hero is everybody sitting in this room, because I can tell you right now, and I'm going to get political for one moment, when something really, really bad happened at a really good university in Pennsylvania, I said, in a sad way, I said, I don't think that could happen here. And I'll tell you why, because of the people sitting in this room. But I wanted to honor some people that helped me. By the way, people come up and they get these awards and they say they don't deserve them. Well, I think we do deserve this award. We, okay? And the we is my family. They're here. Luann, my kids. There's Hal from coming in from Louisville with the Ronald McDonald House of Kentuckiana. Tim Headley, also known as Ferris Bueller. My daughter Heather, the nurse, RN. I love nurses. My son-in-law Larry and my mother-in-law Eloise Hart. And my daughter Maggie is working at Derrick Brooks's charter school, or she'd be here. So, you know, yeah, we deserve this award. Look at this crew. I got an all-star crew. I've got some more to share with you, though. The Children's Guardian Board. I walked into this board, and you're right, David, you don't really get to retire. I'm working on it, but it's not working very well. I'm working for free. And I walked into this board meeting. They recruited me. They said, you need to be on this board. And I was like, oh, sure. And I walk in, and they go, by the way, we raise $200,000 a year for the children that come into care, and that's the way it goes. And I'm like, do you realize, David, I was using that excuse, do you realize how bad the economy is? And they were like, no, we don't realize how bad the economy is. We don't really care. We're going to raise $200,000. So if a kid needs to go to camp, we had one young lady that said, I'm having trouble with my body weight and my fitness. Can you all help me get a membership to a health club? And we did. It wasn't fancy, but we got her one. Okay, so in our Children's Guardian Fund, our board of directors, they're just phenomenal. And I can go on and on about them. But anyway, Jasmine, Judy, Robert, Wendy, Debbie, Nancy, Mike, Alan, Ian, Tom, Stephen, Jerry, and Susan, and we do deserve it. And by the way, one quick note on Susan, she was also one heck of a prosecutor years ago when, as I said the other day to one of the judges, we almost were doing it right. It's real hard to do this stuff right when you're taking kids into care. And the next group you see there on my list is Guardian Ad Litem, Pam and her 400 volunteers working for 1,300 kids in this circuit. I can't say enough about them. our state attorney's office, you know, the people in my chair, we're supposed to always say you don't prosecute enough, you don't send them away long enough. But I'll tell you, we have historically had pretty darn good prosecutors, people like Don Buff and Suzanne O'Donnell, and I'm really proud of them. And the judges of this circuit, I found out in traveling around the state, David, the 12th Judicial Circuit of Florida has one of the most impressive judiciaries in the state. And you can see the names there, from Judge Adams to Judge Hayworth. They really, most of the time, they came in and said, okay, tell us, guardians, tell us, people from Child Protection, what's in the best interest of these abused kids so this doesn't happen again. And that's really neat. And then some detectives, Grant, Schultz, Oreo, they're some of the ones. Another example of why what happened sadly in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania couldn't happen here, my friends who are cops, they would arrest me in a heartbeat if they thought I was hurting somebody. And you know, I say that in all honesty. One of them I go to Buccaneer games with, but if he thought I was hurting children, he'd put me away quickly. So that's the way it's got to be. So one more group. And these are kind of the unsung heroes, but these are the groups that without them, we really, well, let me put the judges up here first, because you got to see them. It's so cool, all of our judges. And the next group you're going to love. One of the things that when I was sitting today with Bill Sadler, and I said, you know that you guys, what you guys do at the agencies keeps these kids from having these gaps where they're involved in breaking and entering, they're involved in substance abuse, and some of the groups are, of course, Bill Sadler, I'm really proud of Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc., you know, there's a wonderful list there. Children First, that would be Philip Tavel and his group, the Jewish Family and Children's Service, Dr. Shea's here today with the Florida Center. See what we've got here in Sarasota? We have an all-star team. So we do deserve this award, right? And then my colleagues, my former colleagues from the Child Protection Center, and we got some awards, and we were recognized. But look at that list. People like Doug Staley, Ruth Shapiro, the master therapist. These are the people, and look at the doctors we had, Dr. Norman Goldstein, the late Dr. Goldstein, and Dr. Catherine Keeley. We had a supervised visitation program with volunteers that would sit in a little room for 2 hours with families that had a lot of problems, and sometimes were a little bit scary. They said, that's all right. You know, these kids need to see their parents. This is their family. And then finally, so Jasmine can say, he's going too long, he's over. I really want to thank you guys because, David, I'm going to use this term. I think what really is happening is you all, because of the work that you do, because you took the time and spent the money to come sit at this table and hear about what David says about our children, you really are, you're helping to save the world one child at a time, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the award, and yes, we do deserve it, don't we? So thank you so much.